Sunday, 14th of June 1914, Sir Walter's Cottage, Artiswell. Welcome back, everyone. Shock news from Carolady's death last night. I came down to breakfast next morning, after 8 hours of blessed dreamless sleep. I found Sir Walter decoding a telegram in the midst of muffins and marmalade. His fresh rosiness of yesterday's seemed a thought tarnished.
I had a busy hour on the telephone after you went to bed. I got my chief to speak to the First Lord and the Secretary for War, and they're bringing Roy over a day sooner. Now, this wire clinches it. He'll be in London at 5. Odd that the code word for a sous chef d'etat major general should be porker.
He directed me to the hot dishes and went on.
Not that I think it'll do much good. If your friends were clever enough to find out the first arrangement, they're clever enough to discover the change. I would give my head to know where the leak is. We believed there were only 5 men in England who knew about Royer's visit, and you may be certain there were fewer in France, for they manage these things better there.
The Wire, page 1. Royer dines with my chief, and then comes to my house where 4 people will see him. Whitaker from the Admiralty, myself, Sir Arthur Drew, and General Winstanley. At my house he will get a certain document from Whitaker, and after that he will be motored to Portsmouth, where a destroyer will take him to the Havre. He will never be left unattended for a moment till he is safe on French soil. The same with Whitaker till he meets Royer.
That is the best we can do, and it's hard to see how there can be any miscarriage. But I don't mind admitting that I'm horribly nervous. This murder of Carolides will play the deuce in the chancelleries of Europe. Hannay, can you drive a car?
Why, yes.
Well, you'll be my chauffeur today and wear Hudson's rig. You're about his size. You have a hand in this business and we're taking no risks. There are desperate men against us who will not respect the country retreat of an overworked official.
It was a soft, breathless June morning, with a promise of sultriness later, but it was delicious enough swinging through the little towns with their freshly watered streets, and past the summer gardens of the Thames Valley. Back into London we go. I landed Sir Walter at his house in Queen Anne's Gate punctually by 11:30. The first thing he did was take me around to Scotland Yard. There we saw a prim gentleman with a clean-shaven lawyer's face.
McGillivray, I've brought you the Portland Place murderer.
The reply was a wry smile.
It would have been a welcome present, Bullivant. This, I presume, is Mr. Richard Hannay, who for some days greatly interested my department.
Mr. Hannay will interest it again. He has much to tell you, but not today. For certain grave reasons, his tale must wait for 4 hours. Then, I can promise you, you will be entertained and possibly edified. I want you to assure Mr. Hannay that he will suffer no further inconvenience.
This assurance was properly given.
You can take up your life where you left off. Your flat, which probably you no longer wish to occupy, is waiting for you, and your man is still there. As you were never publicly accused, we considered that there was no need of a public exculpation. But on that, of course, you must please yourself.
McGillivray, we may want your assistance later on. Come and see me tomorrow, Hannay. I needn't tell you to keep deadly quiet. If I were you, I would go to bed, for you must have considerable arrears of sleep to overtake. You'd better lie low, for if one of your Black Stone friends saw you, there might be trouble.
Of course.
It was very pleasant to be a free man, able to go where I wanted. A free man. Midday. I went to the Savoy Lounge, ordered very carefully a very good luncheon, and then smoked the best cigar the house could provide. But I was still feeling nervous. When I saw anybody look at me in the lounge, I grew shy and wondered if they were thinking about the murder. The afternoon. I took a taxi and drove miles away to North London. I walked back through the fields and lines of villas and terraces that then slums and mean streets, and it took me pretty nearly 2 hours. During the evening, I dined at a restaurant in Jermyn Street. I was no longer hungry and let several courses pass untasted. I drank the best part of a bottle of Burgundy, but it did nothing to cheer me up. An abominable restlessness had taken possession of me. The apartment. I didn't feel like going back to my flat. That had to be faced sometime, but as I still had sufficient money, I thought I would put it off until the next morning and go to a hotel for the night. A free man. I had only been a month under the ban of the law, and it was quite enough for me. Yet I felt curiously at a loose end. I felt that great things, tremendous things, were happening, or about to happen, and I, who was the cogwheel of the whole business, was out of it. Here I was, a very ordinary fellow, with no particular brains, and yet I was convinced that somehow I was needed to help in this business through, and that without me it would all go to blazes. I told myself it was sheer silly conceit, that 4 or 5 of the cleverest people living, with all the might of the British Empire at their backs, had the job in hand. Yet I couldn't be convinced. It seemed as if a voice kept speaking in my ear, telling me to be up and doing, or I would never sleep again. The upshot was, at about 9:30 I made my mind to go to Queen Anne's Gate. Very likely I would not be admitted, but it would ease my conscience to try. On my way, I passed a group of young men. They were in evening dress, had been dining somewhere and were going out to the music hall. One of them was Marmaduke Jopley.
By God, the murderer! Here, you fellows hold him! That's Hannay, the man who did the Portland Place murder!
I wasn't looking for trouble, but my ill temper made me play the fool. The sight of Marmy's imbecile face was more than I could bear.
What's going on here?
Oh, this man is the Portland Place murderer!
Damn it all! Make the fellow shut up! I advise you to leave me alone, Constable. Scotland Yard knows all about me, and you'll get a proper wigging if you interfere.
You've got to come along with me, young man. I saw you strike that gentleman cruel hard.
You began it too, for he wasn't doing nothing. I seen you. You best go quietly or I'll have to fix you up. Watch him! Watch him! Come back here!
I have a very fair turn of speed, and that night I had wings. In a jiffy, I was in Pall Mall and had turned down towards St James's Park. Happily, there were few people about, so no one tried to stop me. I was staking all on getting to Queen Anne's Gate.
I must see Sir Walter. My business is desperately important.
That butler was a great man. Without moving a muscle, he held the door open and then shut it behind him.
Sir Walter is engaged, sir, and I have orders to admit no one. Perhaps you will wait.
See here. There's trouble about, and I'm in it. But Sir Walter knows, and I'm working for him. If anyone comes and asks if I'm here, tell him a lie.
I was seated and told to wait. He returned to the door, and with a face like a graven image, waited to be questioned.
This is the house of Sir Walter Bullivant, and I am under the strictest orders not to let anyone, no matter who, interrupt his office.
Right then. Queen Anne's Gate. Got a newspaper here. What is this? Greek Premier assassinated. Horror descended on Whitehall last night. After Greek Prime Minister Konstantin Karolidis was shot dead in London, the murder took place around 7 p.m. in the private apartment in Horse Guards where the Greek Premier was staying at the invitation of the Foreign Office. Although the area around St James's Park was busy at the time, Scotland Yard has released no details of the suspect, and the assassin remains at large. Karolidis was alone at the time of the shooting, and no direct witnesses to the act have been established. Police and security agents have yet to confirm whether the shooter was located in the room or fired from an adjacent building. Motivations for the assassination were unclear, and Karolidis is known to have had numerous enemies. Ottoman influence is an unlikely candidate, although relations between Karolidis and the Porte were relatively cordial compared to those of his predecessors. Berlin's efforts to form an alliance with Bulgaria and its long-standing relationship with the Ottomans have led to a tense relationship between Berlin and Athens. German Foreign Minister Schottel recently described Karolidis as a millstone around the necks of the Greeks. The German theory has supporters within Parliament. Sir Humphrey has already suggested that we will most likely find the hand of the Kaiser somewhere near the trigger of the gun. Ooh. I hadn't waited long until there came another ring at the doorbell. The butler made no bones about admitting this new visitor. I recognised the First Sea Lord, the man they say that made the new British Navy. He passed my alcove, and I was ushered into a room at the back of the hall. As the door opened, I could hear the sound of low voices. It shut, and I was left alone again. For 20 minutes I sat there, wondering what I was to do next. Then the door of the back room opened, and the First Sea Lord came out. He walked past me, and in passing he glanced in my direction, and for a second we looked at each other in the face. I had never seen the great man before, and he had never seen me. But in that fraction of time something sprang into his eyes, and that something was recognition. You can't mistake it. It's a flicker, a spark of light, a minute's shade of difference that means one thing and one thing only.
Lord Allowa's residence. How may I help you?
Is his lordship at home?
His lordship returned half an hour ago and has gone to bed. He's not very well tonight. Will you leave him a message, sir?
I knew it.
Not a moment could be lost, so I marched boldly into the door of that back room and entered without knocking. Sunday, 14th of June 1914, Queen Anne's Gate, London. Welcome back to the 39 Steps.
And I feel reassured.
Sir Walter!
Gentlemen!
5 surprised faces looked up from the round table. There was Sir Walter, and Drew, the War Minister, whom I knew from his photographs. There was a slim elderly man, whom was probably Whitaker, the Admiralty official. And there was General Winstanley, conspicuous by the long scar on his forehead. Lastly, there was a short, stout man with an iron-grey moustache and a bushy eyebrows that must have been Royer.
This is Mr. Hannay, of whom I have spoken to you. I'm afraid, Hannay, this visit is ill-timed.
That remains to be seen, sir. But I think it may be in the nick of time. For God's sake, gentlemen, tell me who went out a minute ago.
Sir Walter's face reddened with anger.
Lord Allowa.
It was not. It was his living image, but it was not Lord Allowa. It was someone who recognized me, someone I have seen in the last month. He had scarcely left the doorstep when I rang up Lord Allowa's house and was told he had come in half an hour before and had gone to bed.
Who?
The Black Stone.
Nonsense.
I sat down in the chair so recently vacated and looked around at 5 badly scared gentlemen. Sir Walter got up and left the room while we looked blankly at the table. He came back in 10 minutes later with a long face.
I have spoken to Allowa. Had him out of bed, very grumpy. He went straight home after Malross's dinner.
But it's madness. Do you mean to tell me that that man came here and sat beside me for the best part of half an hour and that I didn't detect the imposture? Allowa must be out of his mind.
I was getting back my coolness.
Don't you see the cleverness of it? You were too interested in other things to have any eyes. You took Lord Allowa for granted. If it had been anybody else, you might have looked more closely, but it was natural for him to be here, and that put you all to sleep.
Royer bent his wise brows on the assembly.
The young man is right. His psychology is good. Our enemies have not been foolish. I will tell you a tale. It happened many years ago in Senegal.
Royer's close shave. Many years ago, the General Royer was quartered in a remote station in Senegal. To pass the time, he fished for long barbel in the river. I'll be back soon, girl. One morning his horse was unaccountably restless. Royer kept soothing her with his voice, his mind intent on fishing. I'll be back soon, girl. A couple of hours passed. Oh no. Roya stood face to face with an old man-eater, the terror of the village.
What happened?
I was enough of a hunter to know a true yarn when I heard it.
I stuffed my fishing rod into his jaws, and I had a pistol. Also, my servants came presently with rifles. But he left his mark on me.
He held up a hand which lacked 3 fingers.
Consider. The mare had been dead more than an hour, and the brute had been patiently watching me ever since. I never saw the kill, for I was accustomed to the mare's fretting, and I never marked her absence, for my consciousness of her was only of something tawny, and the lion filled that part. If I could blunder thus, gentlemen, in a land where men's senses are keen, why should we busy, preoccupied urban folk not err also?
Sir Walter nodded. No one was ready to gainsay him.
Well, I suppose there is nothing for it but to change the plans.
Whitaker was looking very glum.
Did you tell Lord Alloa what has happened? No? Well, I can't speak with absolute assurance, but I'm nearly certain we can't make any serious change, unless we alter the geography of England.
He paused and looked around.
God, and we have not a rag of a clue.
Besides, there is the post. By this time the news will be on its way.
No. You do not understand the habits of the spy. He receives personally his reward, and he delivers personally his intelligence. We in France know something of the breed. Now, there is still a chance, mes amis. These men must cross the sea, and there are ships to be searched and ports to be watched. Believe me, the need is desperate for both France and Britain.
I had a sudden inspiration.
Where is Scudder's book? Quick, man! I remember something in it.
What is it going to be?
Um, ha. 39 steps. 39 steps. I counted them. High tide, 10:17 p.m. What relevance is all?
The Admiralty man was looking at me as if I'd thought I'd gone mad.
Don't you see? It's a clue. Scudder knew where these fellows laired. He knew where they were going to leave the country, though he kept the name to himself. Tomorrow was the day, and it was some place where high tide was at 10:17.
But they may have gone tonight.
Not they. They have their own snug, secret way, and they won't be hurried. I know Germans, and they are mad about working to a plan. Where the devil can I get a book of tide tables?
Whitaker brightened up.
It's a chance. Let's go over to the Admiralty.
We got into 2 of the waiting motor cars. Sir Walter went off to Scotland Yard to mobilise McGillivray. The Admiralty. A resident clerk was unearthed, who presently fetched from the library the Admiralty tide tables. The tide tables. I sat at the desk where the others stood around, for somehow or other I had gotten charge of this expedition. But it was no good. so far as I could see, 1017 might cover 50 places. We had to find some way of narrowing the possibilities. There must be some way of reading this riddle. The riddle. The steps. What did Scudder mean by steps? If it were dock steps, why mention the number? It must be some place with several staircases and one marked out from the others by having 39 steps. High tide. Why was high tide so important? It must be some little harbour or no harbour at all. There were no sets of staircases on any harbour that I ever seen. The place must be a bit of an open coast. Germany. He's a man in a hurry. He wants a speedy and secret passage. They wouldn't travel by a big boat from a regular harbour. There is no regular steamer sailing at that hour. Which coast? I must put myself in the enemy's shoes. I wouldn't leave from the Channel or the west coast. Scotland is too far. I should try for Ostend or Antwerp or Rotterdam. Or should I sail from somewhere on the east coast between Cromer and Dover? Non-elementary. This is all guesswork. I am no kind of Sherlock Holmes, but I do have the feeling about all of this. No time. Time is running out. 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 I set out all my conclusions on a bit of Admiralty paper. Fairly certain. Place where there are several sets of stairs. One of these matters distinguished by having 39 steps. Full tide at 10:17 p.m. Leaving shore only possibility at full tide. Steps not dock steps, and so place probably not harbour. No regular night steamer at 10:17 means of transport must be tramp, unlikely, yacht or fishing boat. Guessed. Place not a harbour but open coast. Small boat, trawler, yacht or launch. Place somewhere on the east coast between Cromer and Dover. Sir Walter had joined us, and presently MacGillivray arrived. He had sent out instructions to watch the ports and railway stations for the 3 men whom I had described to Sir Walter. Not that he or anybody else thought that would do much good.
Here's the most I can make of it. We have got to find a place where there are several staircases down to the beach, one of which has 39 steps. I think it's a piece of open coast with biggish cliffs somewhere between the Wash and the Channel. Also, it's a place where full tide is at 10:17 tomorrow night.
Then an idea struck me.
Is there no inspector of coast guards or some fellow like that knows the east coast?
Why, yes, there is. He lives in Clapham. Let me get him now.
He went off in a car to fetch him. I lit a pipe and then went over the whole thing again till my brain grew weary. About 1 in the morning, the Coast Guard man arrived. He was a fine old fellow, with the look of a naval officer, and was desperately respectful to the company.
This is the chap.
Good evening, gentlemen.
We want you to tell us the places you know on the east coast where there are cliffs and where several sets of steps run down to the beach.
What kind of steps do you mean, sir? There are plenty of places with roads cut down through the cliffs, and most roads have a step or two in them. Or do you mean regular staircases, all steps, so to speak?
Whitaker looked towards me.
We mean regular staircases.
He reflected for a minute or two.
I don't know that I can think of any. Wait a second. There's a place in Norfolk, Brattlesham, beside a golf course, where there are a couple of staircases to let the gentleman get a lost ball.
That's not it.
Then there are plenty of marine parades, if that's what you mean. Every seaside resort has them.
I shook my head.
It's got to be more retired than that.
Well, gentlemen, I can't think of anywhere else. Of course, there's the Rough.
What's that?
The big chalk headland in Kent, close to Bradgate. It's got a lot of villas on the top, and some of the houses have staircases down to a private beach. It's a very high-toned sort of place, and the residents there like to keep by themselves.
We're on the scent at last. How can I find out what is the tide at the Rough?
I can tell you that, sir. I once was let a house there in this very month, and I used to go out at night to the deep sea fishing. The tide's 10 minutes before Bradgate.
I closed the book and looked around at the company.
If one of those staircases has 39 steps, we have solved the mystery, gentlemen. I want the loan of your car, Sir Walter, and a map of the roads.
Of course.
If Mr. McGillivray will spare me 10 minutes, yes, I think we can prepare something for tomorrow.
Good. I, for one, am content to leave the matter in Mr. Hannay's hands.
It was ridiculous of me to take charge of the business like this, but they didn't seem to mind, and after all, I had been on the show from the start. Besides, I was used to rough jobs, and these eminent gentlemen were too clever not to see it. By 3:30 in the morning, I was tearing past the moonlit hedgerows of Kent, with McGillivray's best man, Scariff, on the seat beside me.